5th of April 2023. I'd like to welcome everyone attending, welcome anyone who is tuning in on the live stream, and just a reminder again for your mobile phones to be either off or on silent, please. We will have a short break by 11 a.m, although I anticipate we may be completed by then. So I'd like to invite Councillor Fisher-Wang to open up our meeting with the karakia.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tu taua mai runga, tu taua mai raro, tu taua mai roto, tu taua mai waho. Kia tau ai te mauritu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tae kie.
Kia ora, thank you very much, Councillor Wang. I call for any apologies. There do appear to be none. I believe Councillor Waru should be here shortly, so perhaps apologies for lateness for him. May I please have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Kai Fong, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Any declarations of interest this morning? There are none. Any urgent items not on the agenda? There also appear to be none. So we'll move to the confirmation of minutes of the previous committee meeting held, which was on the 22nd of March. That's on page 6. And I ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee meeting held on 22nd of March 2023 be confirmed as true and correct. Moved by Councillor Kai Fong, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Just checking that there were no corrections required. There appear to be none. I've put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. That's carried. And we move to our staff report for today on page 8. We'll get someone to move the report, please. That the report proposed procurement plan for the Stage 2 and progress report on Stage 1 implementation of the TARAWERA sewage scheme be received. Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Lee. All those in favour to receive the report, say aye. Thank you. And we hand over to Stavros now. And we also, welcome our members from the Lake TARAWERA Community Association as well. Fantastic to have you here.
Thank you, Your Worship. Morena tatu katoa. The report in front of you, councillors, has got a number of purposes, but primarily is to give you a quick update as to where we are with the TARAWERA reticulation scheme. Remind us that the scheme has been approved and has been embedded in the Council's 2131 long-term plan. In June 2022, Council has agreed to follow a phased approach towards the implementation of the scheme. Stage 1 has been agreed by Council in late August 2022, and the contract has been entered following a signing of agreement with the Crown for the subsidy support of the scheme in December, and now the scheme is in implementation mode at the moment. This report relates to Stage 2, which is proposing a type of procurement recommendation to ensure that we will obtain the optimum results for the scheme. One of the primary reasons for making these recommendations is that the community at TARAWERA are facing a significant capital cost for the scheme upon its completion, and therefore we do need to provide the community with the utmost comfort and assurance that best efforts are made to suppress and compress the gross cost of the scheme to the lowest possible level. Just a quick recap, over the last 12-13 years, Council has engaged into a number of reticulation schemes. About 2,500 properties have been reticulated gradually. TARAWERA is one of the last communities not to be reticulated. We all are aware of the importance of Lake TARAWERA to both our local community, our iwi community, Mana Whenua, at the national and the regional level. There are strong health, cultural, environmental effects and impacts from the reticulation of the scheme. A lot of the people in TARAWERA sourcing their water supplies from the lake, and obviously the presence of septic tanks in the vicinity of the maintenance zone presents a present and ongoing risk to the health of the community, in addition to the health of the lake itself. A concept estimate for the project was constructed in 2018, but of course, as we progress towards the detailed design as part of the 2131 long-term plan, which has been identified because of market conditions and various other factors, that actual cost estimate projections are higher than the estimated 2018, and therefore we have agreed, Council has agreed to proceed in 2 stages to ensure that we undertake the utmost effort to compress those costs, but also Council was under pressure and remains under pressure by the subsidies offered from the Crown, the Ministry of the Environment, to demonstrate practical and substantial completion of the project of the scheme stage 1 by December 2023, this financial year. The community has sought, and they deserve, comfort and transparency to make sure that the final cost of the scheme are as close to viable as possible. Very schematic representation of the scheme. This is when we're talking about stage 1. This is what it means. It's the connection of the outer end of the TARAWERA community onto the pump station in Lake Okareka that was constructed in 2009. It's a 24-kilometer main pressure pipeline with a number of pumping stations to convey wastewater from all the captured properties towards Okareka. Stage 2, which is the subject of this procurement process, involves the installation of on-site, on-property pressure grinder pumps for about 440 properties in the catchment. It comprises about 44 kilometers of secondary pipelines, electrical cables, alarm systems, gardens and ground reinstatement, and so on. So all properties can connect to the main lines installed in stage 1. Over the last few years, obviously, you had some significant engagement with the local community, and the members of the TARAWERA Ratepayers Association are here today to attest to that. I think all the feedback we have from the community indicates that the vast majority of the community supports the reticulation to mitigate the alternative, which is the installation of OSET, or on-site aerated wastewater treatment systems required by the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. However, the community continued to express a legitimate concern about the final net costs, capital costs of the project, that under the current capital final plan will fall on as a burden to those property owners. They continue to seek consideration for options of further financial assistance to mitigate the final costs to the owners. And obviously, as part and parcel of that consideration and concern, they do require legitimately to see a maximum compression of the gross cost of the scheme and assurance that the final costs are as transparent and as competitive as possible. Option 2, as I said earlier, stage 1 was negotiated by engagement with the contractor based on the open tender rates we have received for East Rotorua about just a year earlier. And therefore, we had a very good grasp about what the actual unit rates for this type of schemes are, and to have used those rates to negotiate directly with the contractor. And the need for that was that the Crown made it very clear that before they signed, we have signed a funding deed agreement with them. The stage 1 had to utilize their $6.5 million they have put into the scheme by December 2023. So the time pressures were such that we had to negotiate directly. We didn't have time to go through a full open procurement process at that point in time. But we are comfortable that we have compressed the cost to as close to as competitive as we can make them be for stage 1. Now, stage 2, which is the on-property systems, requires to demonstrate optimum cost outcomes, and therefore, officers, we are recommending option 2, which involves the open market competitive invitation to the sector to offer prices for the supply and installation of the on-property system. and the results of that procurement process are expected to be reported back to Council around about late June, and then we'll talk to the community about it too, and then with your approval and pending and based on the recommendations we will put in front of you, we'll progress to the installation of stage 2. Stage 1 is now in progress, and stage 2 can be done in parallel with that. Just a few bullet points for notes. We recognize and we accept and we respect the legitimate community concern about the final net costs. It is true that sewage articulations, the sewage system is your most expensive piece of infrastructure you got. Very soon you will talk and debate and consider the draft annual plan for 23-24. There is a pie chart in there that clearly indicates the costs of operating and managing sewage systems. Really, it's equivalent to the full cost of your eroding systems, your water systems, and your stormwater systems. So it's an expensive piece of infrastructure, but also one of the most vital pieces of infrastructure you have for both the health of the community and the health of our environment. There's no debate about that. The status quo of continuous septic tanks is non-viable because the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's outset rule requires compliance with the maintenance zone, and about 40% of the existing properties in TARAWERA cannot physically comply with those rules and regulations, and the community expressed their view repeatedly that reticulation is the preferred option. We are required to suppress price for stage 2. The initial price we received in May, June last year was unacceptably high, and officers have worked to redesign and reconfigure the options, and we are comfortable that the open procurement phase will provide us the optimum final price for stage 2. Also, we want to note that while there is some debate in the community about the need for reticulation, the cost of reticulation, and recognizing there are high costs, Rotorua Lakes Council has the ultimate responsibility to pursue health, culture, environmental objectives, and therefore that's a core responsibility of this governance body. Now, the Council also has the authority and the legitimate power to make such decisions and strike rates in line with the funding plan that has adopted or will adopt in due course, and to make efficient use of public resources. Now, officers, and I'm sure all elected members are open to, and our communication signal that, to continue to work with the community to explore options for additional funding support as necessary, and where it's possible to compress the finance cost burden onto that community where the project is completed. So our recommendation is that the report is received, that the Council notes the feedback from the TARAWERA community, and in particular the need to compress gross costs. Note that stage 1 is currently in implementation, and that the procurement option 2 is recommended as the option that most likely provide the best outcome in terms of cost separation for that part of the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stavros. We now open for any questions. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few questions for you, Stavros. First of all, it was lovely to see you at Timu Road last evening, and there was a meeting of residents from Timu at TARAWERA who do have some concerns about this, and so it's my duty to bring these concerns to the Council. The concerns fall under two broad categories. The first is the cost / mandate for this, and the second is lake water quality. So focusing first of all on the cost umbrella, could you tell us please, Stavros, how many ratepayers are there in TARAWERA?
I think there are 446 current property owners or ratepayers in TARAWERA.
Right, so the reason I asked this question is that the total cost of the reticulation scheme would be divided by that number, is that correct?
Not necessarily true. Stage 1 will be divided by 550 properties, and that's the main trunks. And the main trunks making provision for another 100 new properties for the future, and therefore would be the cost of stage 1 will be divided by 550 properties, while stage 2 will divide it by the actual cost of each of the existing properties.
Okay, so round numbers, we take the total cost of the reticulation system, divide by 500, just for easy numbers. So how many residents from TARAWERA have actually expressed support for the reticulation system?
95%.
95%, yeah. So everybody would like a reticulation system. That's really not in dispute. The issue is how much is it going to cost? So how much will it cost each TARAWERA ratepayer to join the reticulation system?
I believe that's what this process is intending to achieve. So we do not have initial costs yet. However, what we do have before us is a decision on how we wish to procure, which the preferred option is an open, transparent tender. So as soon as we have that back, then we'll have the costs.
Okay. Do the residents have a cost for stage 1 available to them?
Yes, residents have been advised by letters, a number of letters on the process we followed and the cost for stage 1 and the cost of the design, and the fact that we are seeking to identify and crystallize the cost for stage 2 so we can have a comprehensive cost for the scheme.
So how much will stage 1 cost the TARAWERA residents?
Depends how you interpret, that cost. If you subtract all the existing subsidies as they stand at the moment and divide by 550, the average cost is about $12,500 per ratepayer.
Have you, I see in the letter from in a letter that was written to you on the 29th of March, it's claimed that we're talking about not less than $45,000 for the whole system. Would that be a reasonable estimate at this stage for the whole system?
I wouldn't like to make a prediction, Councillor Lee, until the procurement stage for stage 2 has been completed.
Elected members will have received an email from a TARAWERA resident last night, Fred Stevens, who is concerned that the total cost might end up in the vicinity of $80,000. Is that feasible or possible?
No.
That would be scaremongering, would you think?
I don't want to express.
It's not appropriate for the staff member
to
actually.
So, how can TARAWERA residents have given informed consent to this proposal when there is no clarity on the cost that it's going to cost them?
There's a long history since 2017 for that, where a whole range of actions and phases have been undertaken with a TARAWERA reference group has been established representing the community. They worked with the council. They went through a long list of options for articulation and or non-articulation. We worked with us to apply to the Ministry of the Environment, the Crown, for subsidies. Subsequent to that, a preferred option has been presented to the Council. In 2020, the Council, November 2020, the Council agreed to this preferred option, embedded it into its long-term draft, long-term plan. It consulted, a special consultation process for that. The Council in June 2021 made a final decision to embed the project into its 2021-31 scheme. Subsequent to that, there were more engagements with the community, long list of engagements, so the community is fully informed of all stages of this project and they're fully aware how we're progressing the installation of the scheme. So they're aware that we've got some cost escalations from the concept design of 2018, but they're aware that we are taking actions to compress this cost to the lowest possible level.
So the TARAWERA residents are, you believe, comfortable with what some have described as an open checkbook that they've been asked to sign for...
Point of order, Your Worship, please.
Point of order, yep.
Just on relevance, I'm sorry, are we dealing with the actual report and the supporting documentation, or are we revisiting the entire decision by a previous council about the entire scheme?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. The questions are straying beyond the relevance of the proposal that we have in front of us, which is around the proposed procurement plan for stage 2. So perhaps if you could keep further questions focused on that. Thank you.
Yes, the reason I'm straying into this area is will become evident in shortly. But the issue is that the current status is that the residents of TARAWERA have, well, there is certainly some controversy over there because they haven't been told how much they're expected to come up with. How much of the, how much is going to be subsidised? Can you help us with that?
$8 million as it stands at the moment.
What is that as a percentage?
Councillor Lee, I think we'll move on for these questions now because you are still delving into the previous costs. We are focused on stage 2 at the moment. Fortunately for us, there have been a significant amount of government funding into this and from MFE in particular, so that is also a cause for Council needing to move quickly to ensure that we were able to meet the obligations of, I believe it was December, where we have those works completed in order to ensure that we do maintain that funding. So we'll move on with questions now, and it probably flows nicely into a question that I did have, which is, of course, what the community is wanting to know is when they may expect to know the cost of it. So we have before us the proposed procurement plan. Once we receive the tenders back and there is a successful tender, when will the community be able to know these costs, I think is the big overarching question.
Thank you, Your Worship. The time frame for the outcomes of the tender should be by the end of June, early July. And at that point in time, we will inform the council and the community because we do have a strong and frank relationship with the local community, and we freely share information to make sure that their interests are as protected as we can make them be.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, June, July is not too far away for the community as well. So progressing with this decision today does ensure that we are able to get that cost to them, the final cost to them, as soon as possible. But of course, today is not committing to any particular cost or decision. Today is only committing to simply, do we want to go out in what sort of way with the tender? And I do support the preferred option. But we'll keep going with questions. We have Councillor Waru up next.
Tēnā koe te marukura o tira tātou katoa morena. Firstly, just apologies for coming a minute or so late there. Very hard to get through 2 bus loads of Ngāti Whakauē down the bottom here when they're getting ready to go on a trip. So yeah, that's why I was a bit late. So aroha mai. Hoi anō. To my questions, tēnā koe Stavros, thank you for your report. There's just a couple of questions, quick ones. Stage 2 needs to demonstrate optimum cost outcomes. Can you explain that a bit more, please?
Sure. Stage 2 involves the installation of grinder pumps and all the related appetiture that connects to the main system. In June last year, we sought from the contractor who is doing the current installation on stage 1 to give some preliminary price for stage 2. And that was too high, in our opinion. It was about $17 million, and in benchmarking that work against other works we're aware of, and the fact that some design optimization could be achieved, we were of the view that the preliminary price offer was too high, and therefore by going to an open, fully competitive tender, we will get the best price the sector can offer to meet those design outcomes we expect.
Okay, thank you. And just a supplementary question to that is there anywhere, I know it's being said in one of the top slides, that first slide you said around the environmental stuff, is that also taken into account as well, the optimum environmental outcomes of this tender?
Councillor Waro, if you probably recall, because you were here in the previous training, in order to progress with this scheme, 2 cultural impact assessments have been undertaken by the mana whenua in the area, and mana whenua are very firm about the need to cease the seepage of septic tanks into the lake for a number of years. Out of the long list of options that have been considered, the current preferred option has been arrived together through that cultural impact assessment reports, and obviously on balance it meets mana whenua expectations, the community's expectations, and our efforts at the moment are centred and focused on to bringing those gross costs to the lowest possible level to satisfy and to meet the expectations of all the relevant communities in the area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have Councillor Kaifong followed by Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Stavros, I know that you are trying to do the best you can financially for both ratepayers and for the council. So based on this option 2 for procurement is going out to the open market for tender, can you just explain to councillors and to the public why this is now a preferred option, given perhaps a change in the contracting world, as previously we would have perhaps gone with a preferred contractor to ensure that we actually had a contractor?
I would correct you on the latter one, Deputy Mayor, because the Council's procurement policy clearly indicates for significant projects we use the open public tender process.
Apologies, sorry, what I meant was before we had
for stage 1.
Yeah, stage 1, we had a...
Stage 1, the time was the essence of stage 1, because the procurement process takes about 6 months to be completed, and the Crown requires us to have to sign a Crown deed agreement, demonstrate that we had contractor on board to start immediate work, and therefore that was the driving factor before, by going through direct negotiation for stage 1. And of course, in parallel with that, we had the cost prices that would provided by full open tenders for Restore 20, and they gave us a very good benchmark as to the relative prices we got for stage 1.
So is there still the opportunity, because that was how we were able to compress prices in stage 1, was to do that value engineering and what was the other terminology, price optimisation negotiations. Is that still a possibility with a open tender contract once we have a preferred tenderer?
Yes,
so that we can ensure that we get the best possible price, which I know you will do. Thank you, Stavros.
Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the presentation, you said that there was further financial assistance looked into to mitigate the costs for the ratepayers in TARAWERA. Can you give us any further information around that, or anything you might be looking into at this stage?
Well, I think what we have communicated to the TARAWERA community constantly is that efforts could be made both at the local level and the national level to see what options are there to support, further support the community. There are always opportunities through Crown funding schemes for freshwater improvements and so on. We have secured the first tranche, but there's nothing over the next couple of years, which that would be the duration of the construction of the scheme. There's nothing stopping us to continue to seek for additional funding from that direction. I cannot guarantee that's available, but certainly there will be opportunities to do that. And if we do it together with the community, obviously we stand a much better chance, to do so.
Thank you. Were there any further questions? We'll take a brief question from Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the indulgence. I am changing tack, so I'm not continuing with the line of questions that you took exception to. Firstly, you say stage 1 has begun. Is there any physical evidence of that at TARAWERA? Is any ground being turned, for example?
The spade turning ceremony starts on the 17th of April. However, between December and now, a whole range of what you call fossicking and utility identification has taken place on a desktop exercise to optimize the lines of pipe thrusting and the location of pump stations, securing lease, for lands and things like that. So all that work has been ongoing since December.
Thank you. And switching to the lake water quality issue, we measure lake water quality, I believe, with the trophic level index. Is that correct?
That's one of the ways.
One of the ways, phosphorus and nitrogen and so forth. Last night it was claimed that the lake water quality of Lake TARAWERA is actually ahead of targets for the lake at present. Is that correct?
I think the scientific evidence is that Lake TARAWERA is at a tipping point where the combination of what we call the collective impact outcome of climate change, ongoing discharge from septic tanks, algae blooms, weather patterns, can very easily tip Lake TARAWERA, which contains about 2.2 billion cubic meters of fresh water, into a eutrophic level, which will be disastrous from the ecosystem in that area. On top of that, it's very clear that other than TLI levels, we've got two cultural impact assessment reports made, constructed in Manawhenua, that they make it very clear that it's abhorrent to them that septic tanks continue to leach into fresh waters. And therefore, TLI, it's one benchmark, but it's not a determining benchmark.
What would you say to the ratepayers who take the view that the reticulation system is not going to make a measurable difference on lake water quality, and that the lake water quality is already, according to the standards set by Helen Cray, really stretched targets? That's the Bay Plenty Regional Council.
That would be a question better posed to the Bay Plenty Regional Council.
The question was, what do you say to the ratepayers of TARAWERA who say that the water quality is not going to be improved and by the reticulation system, and it's already of a really stretch standard at present?
Councillor, I think that there has been plenty of evidence and accurate information that has been provided to us that would be most appropriate to ask of the Bay Plenty Regional Council. Look, I think that we have covered the aspects of this report and these recommendations really well. I just double check if there are any further questions from councillors before we open up for any discussion. Councillor Waru.
Thank you for your indulgence at the manukura. I thought I'd get my one in too while it was going. Just a quick question, Stavros. The septic tank issue, I know it's a big issue, but what would you say, if you have it on hand or in your head with all that mātauranga there, the costs per annum to maintain and use those septic tanks currently? What would they be?
Firstly, the ongoing operation of septic tanks is now illegal. You cannot continue to have septic tanks.
Well, there you have it. Kia ora.
Thank you. Look, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion so we may open up for discussion. We've got that moved by Councillor Kaifong, seconded for Councillor Wang. I'll very quickly read them. That the committee note the background context of the TARAWERA sewage scheme, that the committee consider the procurement options outlined and approve the recommendation to procure the contract for stage 2 of the TARAWERA sewage scheme in accordance with option 2, public open tender for the full scope of work of stage 2, which includes the supply and installation of low pressure grinding pumps and the supply and installation of pipes, valves and boundary assemblies. We are open for discussion. Is there any comments from any councillors before I put that to the vote? Councillor Kaifong.
I thank Chair. As the mover, I'm happy to move this recommendation. We've already heard from Stavros that the council are taking every endeavour they can to ensure that this comes in at the best possible price. It's something that we have to get on and do. We've had quite a lot of debate and discussion in the council chamber around this. We've got indication of the timing from the question that Your Worship has asked, so I'm more than happy to move the recommendation so that we get on and proceed with this.
Thank you. Any further comments? We'll go Councillor Lee, then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, from the, I've had a number of meetings with a number of TARAWERA residents, and the concern comes back to price. Everybody wants a reticulation system, And it all comes back to the cost-benefit analysis. So it's easy, the argument in the debate is easily framed by focusing on orders of magnitude so far as residents are concerned. If there were 50 residents at TARAWERA that had to pay for the system, it wouldn't be financially viable. There are about 500, and that makes it more viable. If there were 5,000 residents at TARAWERA, it would be easily financially viable. So the question really is our council and other residents of TARAWERA going to get bang for our buck? So the TARAWERA residents are being asked to stump up with, let's say, north of $50,000. Now, if that turned up on my rates bill, I'd be a wee bit concerned. And I think the people of Rotorua could be a wee bit sympathetic that that's what TARAWERA residents are facing. So many TARAWERA residents who've lived there a long time simply cannot afford that and may be forced to sell or whatever. Alternative ways of funding this include the council extending a 10-year arrangement to ratepayers at TARAWERA. Another way of funding it would be to extend a 25-year, for example, way for paying it. The problem with that, of course, is it adds to council's debt, and we certainly have a mandate from the community to reduce debt, not extend debt. So that would be unappetising to the rest of the people in Rotorua, but it would make it easier for the people of TARAWERA to pay for it. So this is a big deal. This is a big ask. We currently don't have clarity on stage one. The TARAWERA residents don't have clarity on stage one as to cost, and yet we're rushing off to stage two. It seems to me that the TARAWERA residents are being asked to open their checkbooks and trust council to come up with a number, and there's no limit on the number as yet. I'm not entirely sure, so I'll just leave it there. I'll be voting against this because I think we need to get stage one, we need to get clarity on stage one first, and we need to give some more consideration to how on earth we're going to fund or make it possible for many of the TARAWERA residents to actually pay for this.
Thank you, Councillor, and I do just need to correct you because it's not accurate to speculate on what the costs would be. Those costs cannot be confirmed until we receive the tender price back, and then it would be a decision of council at that time to confirm what those costs are. So I know that there are numbers floating around. However, I must just confirm for accuracy that those would not be correct until we have these tenders back. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to echo at least the concerns expressed by Councillor Lee. I don't know who's going to be more surprised by my agreement with him, Councillor Lee or myself, but I just asked the question, how much longer do we wait to get this project cheaper? Is it going to be cheaper next year with inflation being high again? Is the price going to come down? How much longer do we leave this? Personally, I wish the previous council had moved faster. Maybe we could have brought the price down before the high impacts of inflation have hit in the last couple of years. So I'm in favour of the motion, and I'll be voting for it. And I'd just like to say for those, especially to Councillor Lee, I don't know if he was at the AGM that Her Worship attended alongside Mr. Michaels was there too. We heard the frustration and the concerns from the residents, just as he has heard, and I would also urge that when the prices are known, that we do look on with some compassion and look at long-term solutions, and I'll certainly be advocating for that. But as I say, I just feel that the price is not going to come down, and the sooner we get on and get this completed will be better for everyone in that community and Rotorua and our lakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Waru.
Nā koe te manukura otira he kōrero paku noho tāku. Just just as I was listening to Stavros and his kōrero, it was clear that the engagement has been done. I know for a fact, mo te taha ki te mana whenua, that septic tanks are just not not acceptable anymore, and they're actually illegal. So actually we have to do something out there, otherwise we're basically putting people in a position where they were going to be acting in an illegal way. Kaore te pai. The cost will always be an issue. Haere ki he. You know, we take the Rotorua sewage scheme as well into account. Same issues, same kaupapa, but everybody was on board. They knew they needed to do something. So I too know a few residents out at TARAWERA, and although they're not, you know, no one's keen on paying more, let's just be honest, but they know they have to, and they know it needs to be done, and that's my own whānau. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, I suppose, but as far as I'm concerned, I think I'm with Councillor O'Brien. It would have been probably better to do it earlier, given the inflation and the cost of materials and labour and all this stuff now going up. Don't know when that's going to come down. So I will be voting in favour of this kaupapa. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Just checking there were no other councillors before I give Councillor Kaifong her right of reply. Sorry, Councillor, you have already spoken.
Point of order, Your Worship. I'd like to move a procedural motion that we leave this item on the table until there is clarity about stage one. There was a number of issues raised at the meeting last night that were verbal assurances were given. I think some of those verbal assurances need to be put into hard copy for the residents. That would help the residents feel a lot more comfortable as to what is happening going forward. We really need to tidy up stage one, I think, before we move on to stage two. So my motion is that we leave this item on the table until there's further clarity on stage one.
Apologies, Councillor Lee. There is an existing motion on the table with the mover and a seconder, so the opportunity to change that has passed now. We have had quite rigorous questioning and debate on this item. I think there is no doubt that there has been sufficient information to the community. I do not support this item laying on the table any further for the fact that we have heard strongly from the TARAWERA community that they do want a solution and they want progress and they want to know the final costs as soon as possible, plus for the fact that if we did not have this scheme started or completed with stage one by December, we would lose the $6.5 million from MFE, which would be disastrous to then have to put that cost back on the community. So we should not delay this any further. I believe we do have support from a majority around the table to progress as quickly as possible, and I am very pleased that actually this process, we are on the home straight now. This is almost 6 years in the making, but this council is completing this process in the most transparent way possible, where we will go out for a public open tender to ensure that we get the best fixed cost, best fixed cost for the community. So I will take a comment from Councillor Maxwell, and if there is nobody else, then I will hand over to Deputy Mayor Kaifong in conclusion.
Point of order.
What is your point of order?
Standing Order 25.1 states that a procedural motion to close or adjourn a debate takes precedence over other business. So it would appear that my motion would need to be taken immediately according to that.
So if we were being specific on the standing orders, and I'll let staff correct me if I am incorrect, you have already spoken to the motion, so you would technically not be able to put a procedural motion as well. We do have a mover and a seconder for this recommendation, not to get technical on it, but I do believe that we have the support around the table to progress, so we will progress. Councillor Lee. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be supporting the motion, and I take on board what fellow councillors have said earlier, that previous council, if they could have moved faster on this, and I agree with that. I wish we could have moved a lot faster. But you can see why, because if Councillor Lee was successful in holding this up, further delays, further costs, and maybe we might need another third cultural impact report from mana whenua to make it even more clearly that those are taonga out there at Lake TARAWERA. So I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And final right of reply to Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. I would urge my fellow councillors to support this recommendation. This is something that's been going on for a very, very long time. We've already heard that, costs have risen because of delays, so we can't afford to delay any further. I know that Councillor Lee has indicated that there are cost implications that he's concerned about, but I think that there are cost implications to the community as a whole if we do not protect the environmental status of the lake water quality. The other thing is that it's clear in the report that septic tanks are illegal, and the effect will be that some 170 properties will not be able to physically achieve compliance with the offset rules, so effectively they would be red stickered, so that would be an even bigger financial burden to those properties. I think that we need to give the community some certainty by continuing on with this. This will give us the price. We've already heard from Stavros that this proposed way of going out for procurement will give us the best option and the way of getting the cheapest price for this. And I think also, councillors, you need to trust yourself and the staff that we will make the right decision for the community when the opportunity comes for us to decide how the cost is levied on the ratepayer and the council and whether it falls on borrowings. But I think that's a decision for the future. It doesn't need to figure into this discussion now. What we're talking about here is a procurement decision, and I would urge councillors to support this recommendation going forward so that we don't delay the decision any longer where costs will continue to rise. Thank you.
Thank you, and just also confirming that there will be a mechanism in place for those who require it to help pay off the contribution. So I know that's strongly supported by elected members as well. So that's the discussion for this item. We do have a mover and a seconder. I have read them out already, so we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Would you like your vote recorded?
Yes, please.
That's carried. Thank you very much, Stavros. We now have a We now have a resolution to go into public excluded. We are looking at two items for consideration. One of them is the confidential minutes from the previous meeting, and the second item is administration fee increases for Waikete Valley Thermal Pools Complex. The reason for going into confidential is due to commercial sensitivity. Would like to thank our members from Lake TARAWERA for joining us today. Thank you very much. And I ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that Council move into public excluded session. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Kaifong.